Call the meeting to order. And we'll note that all commissioners are present. And the first item of business is the order of business. And Mr. Colling, you have some changes to the order of business, but it looks to me like you've made them on this agenda.
Yes, Mr. President, they should be made on the agenda that's attached with your packet. We would ask that the commission take off the resolutions that were identified under item 4C and replace it with a series of right-of-way agreements, which I can go through when we get to that item.
Okay, are there any other changes to the agenda or the order of business?
Mr. President, there is one other item change to the consent agenda. We would ask that you strike item 2C at this time.
Item 2C?
Yes.
Okay, strike that. Any other changes? Okay, with the changes to the consent agenda and changes to item C of the non-timetable agenda, would there be a motion to approve the order of business?
I'll move we approve.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. So the motion carries unanimously. We'll now go to the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda you wish to discuss? Not, would there be a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. We'll move to the non-timetable agenda. And the first item we have there is to consider as a task order with KLJ, and it says City Administrator Kessel's going to introduce that item.
Thank you, President Johnson and Commission. Before you tonight is a task order for the Crooked Crane Trail. As you're aware, the Crooked Crane Trail has been awarded a outdoor heritage grant in the amount of $975,000. So this task order is to utilize those funds and some funds raised locally to create a phase 1 execution of the exercise and fitness loop around Patterson Lake. It'll be in the area that is developed as a Frisbee golf area. It's kind of in that proximity. So this would engage KLJ to design, survey and design that area. There is a page 9 of your document. It talks and outlines the construction timeline for this project. We hope that we would go to bid in August of this year and begin construction shortly thereafter. So it'd be our recommendation that that we approve this task order and engage KLJ to design and survey the Crooked Crane Trail project. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Any comments or questions? If not, is there a motion regarding task order M5?
Make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion?
I will abstain from the vote, Mr.
Okay.
President.
Mr. Jackson will abstain. Any other discussion? Hearing none, then we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson abstains. Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. That brings us to item B, which is a financial agreement with the North Dakota Department of Transportation regarding Exit 56. And Mr. Kessel is also going to introduce that item.
Thank you, President Johnson. This agreement is between the DOT and the City of Dickinson. When Exit 56 was originally envisioned, this is part of our permanent bypass. This would be the bypass connection with the interstate, and then it of course travels north and connects with Highway 22. When that project was first discussed, the DOT approached the city for a cost share in the amount of $5 million. And at that time, We tentatively agreed, at least it was proposed to us from the department director at the DOT. So this agreement outlines and therefore documents that agreement to provide $5 million to the DOT for our share of the construction of that exit 56. I did have a conversation with DOT staff with regards to our surge funding amount being lowered by $11 million. That $11 million went to the DOT. So what they didn't fund us of what we expected went to them, and I politely asked if they would consider that as our payment to meet our payment for this $5 million, and that is not something that they find acceptable. So we originally thought we would get some of the funds from private developers in the area, those that would use that exit 56. The development in that area has, the time frame has changed a little, and we're not expecting that will be annexed into the city right away. So we have not collected any of the $5 million from local development that has occurred in that area. So as of today, my expectation would be the $5 million would fall upon us unless we're able to collect dollars after the agreement is executed. So with that, I'll take any other questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel. You've heard his introduction and explanation. Comments or questions?
Are we expecting any local share on the overpass?
We are expecting some expenses, but not a local share. We'll.
I understand we have some work we need to do, but for the DOT project itself, no local share.
No local share.
This happened, I think at least 2 years ago, maybe closer to 3. But in a meeting with the North Dakota DOT, like Mr. Kessel says, we were discussing the exit 56 and the permanent bypass, and they asked if we would commit $5 million of local funds towards this project. And at the time, it seemed like a good commitment, and I think it's still a good commitment today, because between that exit 56 and the interim bypass, we are moving a lot of truck traffic that would have flown through the city of Dickinson and out on the exit 59 and the west edge of Dickinson out of those areas. So I think it's a reasonable deal for us. Naturally, I'd liked if they would have said yes to your suggestion that they already got our $5 million when we lost that in the surge funding, but we've had pretty good cooperation from the North Dakota DOT on our major projects.
If you include the overpass that Mr. Jackson mentioned, you include this project, the remainder of the bypass connection, 30th Avenue, the interim bypass, the DOT is probably spending $100 million in the Dickinson area over the course of last year, this year, next year.
Yeah, if you lump it all together, our share is $5 million. That's not a bad deal.
Right.
But at any rate, that's a little bit of the history. And in the like the numbers that some of you may have seen that was contained in my testimony to a couple of different legislative committees, I assumed in our numbers that we were paying that $5 million. That was one of the projects, you know, along with the other capital projects. So.
And that's, President Johnson, that's exactly what I was going to mention. We did carry this as a project in our 2015 capital projects plan. So it is budgeted for. We'd have paid for that as the agreement lays forth today.
The funds won't be, would not be due, I mean, they will be due as construction progress. It's not like we'd have to come up with 5 million. I'm assuming it's going to take a couple years to complete everything. I mean, the overpass here in town is 2 seasons at least, if I remember.
Yeah, and Commissioner Steiner, they've already constructed a portion of this project, so I think they expect to be complete by the end of the season this year.
The exit overpass.
Correct.
This year. But I'm talking about coming into town and doing the over the railroad tracks, that bypass.
That you're correct on that. That will not be completed this construction season. They look at that as a different project. The Exit 56 stands alone in the DOT's eyes as a project, and the connection between 56 and 22 is a second project.
And they are requiring any funds from us for the overpass here in town.
No,
No, they're not.
they're tying the fund, this $5 million is tied to exit 56.
That's correct. Yeah. So essentially, we'll use 44 million of the surge funding we received. We'll end up using those funds to fund this agreement.
Any other discussion? Is there a motion regarding the finance agreement with the North Dakota DOT?
Mr. President, I'd move we approve the financial agreement.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. Okay, we go to item C. Item C is a series of right-of-way acquisitions, and I'm assuming each one of these requires a separate motion.
That's correct, Mr. President.
So I think we'll, unless Mr. Colling objects, we'll have him make the general introductions, and then I'm going to ask if you have an issue with any of the right-of-ways listed here, right-of-way acquisitions, and we can discuss that. If you have no issues, or we get through the discussion of the issues, then I think we can move through the motions fairly quickly. But so we'll let Mr. Colling make the proper introductions.
Mr. President and Commissioners, what I have for you is a series of 13 right-of-way agreements or agreements pertaining to right-of-way for our road construction projects this season. Originally, we had planned on bringing resolutions before you to ask for permission or authority to take some of this right-of-way by eminent domain. We were able late last week to reach agreements with all of the landowners, save one, which I'll address. But all of the other landowners did end up signing right-of-way agreements with us to convey the right-of-way for State Avenue, 21st Street West, and 40th Street. In order to ascertain the reasonable value of the right-of-way, we did have appraisals performed for each of these parcels, and the acquisitions of this right-of-way is made for the appraised value of each parcel. There is some additional severance damages that are part of the agreements, or 3 of the agreements on State Avenue. The agreement for parcel 3A1, owned by Paul and Terry Haroff, parcels 7, 8, 9, and 10, owned by Dean and Geraldine Kubis, and parcels 11-1 and 12-1, owned by Janet Perkel, have some additional severance damages attached to them. Additionally, I should note, one of the agreements you have is a public utility easement for Clear Creek Properties. Clear Creek Properties owns a parcel on 21st Street, just to the west of the intersection, and they did request a public utility easement in order to connect their sewer service to State Avenue. We did have our engineering department look through that, and appears to be appropriate, so that public utility easement will exist on the south 30 feet of the Public Works building plat, or excuse me, Public Safety building plat. I'm happy to address any of the other items, any of the other agreements or appraised values, or other terms of the agreements, if you have them. Otherwise, I would request motions to approve each of these 13 agreements. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Coley. You've heard his introduction. You have the memo in your electronic board book that gives you some additional financial information. Are there any of these that you have issues with that you'd like more information or you'd like to make a statement about? Okay. Then on item 1C, where it says MDU, because of my affiliation with MDU, I will not be able to vote on that one, so Mr. Jackson will handle the motion and the vote there. But if you have nothing else, we'll get started and go through these. Is everybody comfortable? Okay. So we begin with the right-of-ways on State Avenue, and item A is the one with Shelley Lenz. Would there be a motion regarding this agreement?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. We'll go to item B there, that's voluntary hair-off right-of-way. Is there a motion regarding this one?
I'll move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries, and Mr. Jackson will conduct the next motion.
Okay, the MDU tract is also on State Avenue, so we need a motion to approve that memorandum agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on the MDU motion? If not, we'll vote. Mr. Oltmans?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. That motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Move on to item D, Don Hout, consideration to approve right-of-way agreement. Is there a motion regarding this one?
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second? We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. The next one is the Dean and Geraldine Kubis right-of-way acquisition. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none again, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so that motion carries. Item F is the Janet Perkel right-of-way acquisition. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll move to the 21st Street West right-of-way acquisitions, and the first one is the August Philippi Trust. Motion to approve the memorandum agreement.
So move.
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. So Clear Creek is item B, and that's a right-of-way agreement.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Vote. Mr. Jackson? Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. So the motion carries. Clear Creek, then also, there's a public utility easement that would require approval. Is there a motion regarding this item?
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. Move down to item 3, the 40th Street right-of-way acquisition. First one is a right-of-way agreement with Northern Improvement.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? We'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. The next one's a temporary construction easement with SLH Properties. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. Item C, Lee and Melanie Catherine, and this is to approve a memorandum agreement.
Motion
So
to
moved.
approve.
I'll second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. And finally, this is another memorandum agreement with Earl Hart. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Second was by Mr. Steiner. We'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We get through those okay, Mr. Coley?
You did. You did.
Okay. We'll go to item D then. This is, I'll see if I pronounce this correctly, is it Questica software?
Excellent, very good.
And Mr. Kessel will introduce this item.
If I could, President Johnson, I really want to just take 10 seconds and say that we just went through a lot of right-of-way agreements and such that didn't take you very long, but it took the staff a long time to put these agreements together and have them before you. And I just wanted to recognize those staff members for the amount of time and effort that they put into to make that process as easy as it was for you. And Mr. Kubis and Mr. Coling have put a lot of time into those agreements, and they were not easy. There was a lot of face time with the owners, and sometimes those meetings got emotional. I sat in on a lot of them myself, so I just wanted to recognize them because it's not always easy. But the item specifically is the Questica software. I have distributed a handout for you today. Questica is a software company that focuses specifically on creating budget software for public entities, political entities specifically. As a result of some research, they were identified. I actually met with them at a conference, an ICMA conference, and is where we began discussions with them. We did do some research and found some other budget software through a process of elimination. Questica elevated to rose to the top. We had webinars showing the software with members of the executive team, and this one was definitely the most robust. As you know, we've been using Excel to do the majority of our budgeting, so linking 64 separate Excel spreadsheets has been adequate in the past, but our budgets have increased dramatically in size due to our capital improvements program and our operational revenues that we take in. So using Excel spreadsheets in the way that we have is simply not the best way to do budgeting. The proposal that you have before you is a $70,000 software investment in the budget software. This is a $101,000 initial price, and we've negotiated it down to $70,000. So I'm happy presenting that number to you. I will say that there was other software that was less expensive, but it was very clearly less robust. And we believe that this will be the best software for us. It was a budgeted item. We did not budget the full 70. I would suggest that we use contingency funds and dollars in the operating budgets that will have gone unexpended. So we'll do an end-of-year adjustment. I'm confident that between that and the contingency funds, we'll have the revenue to make up the difference between what we budgeted and what is presented before you today. So this includes the software itself, installation, the accounting integration, so that we have back, last year's and the year before, so we immediately have a history that we can go back and compare, training staff members, and project management. So I do apologize that this is the first time that you saw the document itself. We had a mix-up in what they presented, and so I had to have them redo the budget, or the document before you. So that's why it's a little late. But it is our recommendation that we move forward with the Questica software purchase. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
What was the budgeted amount?
$20,000.
What all staff was involved in vetting this company and selecting the software?
We had the majority of the executive team was invited to do the webinars. We had 2 different softwares that we actually held webinars with. I wouldn't be able to identify exactly who was in each one. They probably could. They're sitting in here today. But I would say that there was 3 or 4 members of the executive team that were involved in this specific webinar on Questica.
IT, accounting,
Yeah, I think Mr. Colling was there. I think Mr. Kubis was there. Yeah, Mr. Gary Zeroff, you were there, right? Yeah, yeah. So it covered a great. I mean, just those alone, and I'm not sure if either of the chiefs were there, but I believe so. So
Okay.
it covered the vast majority of our budget allocations in those departments.
okay.
Did you have anyone from our finance department that participated?
Ms. Bresden, yes, participated, and I will say that this also includes a capital portion. It's not just an operational budget software. It does include capital as well. But to answer your specific question, Ms. Bresden was also present.
Did you get a list of other political subdivisions that use this software?
Yes, in fact, if you go to the, I think it's page 3, page 4, they provided a short list of some of the other users of this software. You can see that there's some rather large companies, or political subdivisions, and that there's also a longer list of smaller subdivisions as well.
This can be implemented without them sending someone on site?
They'll send someone, well, potentially, there are provisions for covering expenses. The majority of the training will happen via Skype or other methods, but they may have someone on site come down, depending upon our needs and how the transition goes.
The reason I ask that is this bid or quote, I should say, doesn't include travel time where they're looking at $185 an hour to a maximum of $500 each way, and then 75 cents per diem.
Right.
Get kind of expensive.
It would, and you'll notice that the line immediately below that one says they don't anticipate needing to travel here, but I'm not going to rule that out. It certainly could be a possibility.
Would it be possible for us to read through this quote and act on this at the next meeting?
The quote itself is active through March 9th. I may be able to get them to extend that. The only other parameter, I guess, other than the date of March 9th, is they want to be able to say that they provided budget software. So in their publications, we would release the right to use the City of Dickinson's name in their promotional materials.
So everything in when the data imports, that's everything our staff can do. Aaron can do it.
And right, and if you'll notice there, when it comes to data imports, most of that stuff they've used. Microsoft Dynamics is a company that they've transitioned data for, at least he told me 35 times. They work very closely with this software. They don't anticipate any issues with taking our existing data and migrating it to theirs. You never know, but they've dealt with this transition dozens of times, literally.
And so after the first year, is there a licensing fee?
There is a licensing fee. That fee would be around $9,000 a year. Yeah, which is right in line with the majority of the other software programs that we have.
And that licensing fee, does that include any kind of maintenance from their part?
Yeah, that includes upgrades to the software itself. I don't believe it includes any additional training, though. It would be implementing the upgrades and the software upgrades themselves, but I don't believe it includes training.
Do we know, are other area communities using proprietary software like this, or they use their own software? Do we know?
I did not check with some of our more populous cities in terms of what software they are using. That is certainly something I could go back and do. I guess I can't answer that question any better than that, Mr. Jackson. I'm not sure what other cities are using for budgeting software. I know that this company specifically is not in North Dakota at this time.
I guess I think it would be good to have a couple weeks to look at it.
The only other thing that I will say with regard to approving it this evening is they anticipate that to get this software up and running and do all the data migration and the training that's required, they're concerned that it'll take about 3 months to get that done. And so we began our budget process in July. So we don't have a whole lot of leeway if we want to implement it for the 2016 budget.
Sounds just right.
Thank you. I agree.
It's dated March 2nd, today's March 2nd, to put a proposal for $70,000, which is $50,000 over budget, on our desk, which we haven't read, and then ask us to approve it doesn't strike me as quite right. So, if it jeopardizes our relationship with them or jeopardizes our ability to use the software by delaying 2 weeks, maybe they're not the right partner or the right software. I suspect if they're the right partner, you can talk to them and explain the situation, and the commission would like to do the prudent thing and be able to read through the information. The commission, if it's that time sensitive, I suspect this commission would come back here on Friday and act on this item. We don't need 2 weeks to read it, but since the next meeting's 2 weeks away, I mean.
I'll certainly make contact with the company itself.
Yeah. Because we've all been through budget cycles here, some of us through many, many cycles, and I think every one of us agree that the city has grown too big, it's too complex to be doing with spreadsheets, and we need a much more formal budgeting tool than Excel spreadsheets. So if it's okay with you, we'll defer this until either a special meeting or a meeting in 2 weeks.
I'll contact them and then contact you as commissioners
Okay.
with regard to their response. That's fair.
Is that, everyone comfortable with that? All right. Well, then, we're going to go to the timetable agenda. We have a 5 o'clock. It's a special use permit regarding a telecommunications tower, and Planning Director Millstone is going to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commission members. This is a request for a telecommunications tower, special use permit for Buell Consulting. The site is located at 11140 34th Street Southwest, and it composes approximately a quarter acre. The Planning and Zoning Commission and city staff recommend approval, subject to conditions.
Okay. You've heard the introduction. Are there questions, comments? for the public's use, can you, besides the address, can you tell us where that is?
It's a couple hundred feet east of the intersection of 34th Street Southwest and 10th Avenue West. It's on the south side of the street.
Okay,
It's on the Cordy property, if that's helpful.
all right. Any other comments or questions by anyone?
I'll move that, you ready for a motion?
Yeah, I think this is Resolution 9. Yep. So, go ahead, Mr.
I'll
Jackson.
move that we approve Resolution 9-2015.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Okay, so we'll go down to non-timetable agenda, item E. There's a city land sale, and Mr. Colling's going to tell us about that.
Mr. President and Commissioners, this is a proposed sale for some property owned by the city, and property is located on the east part of town. It is Lot 2, Block 5, Springwood 2nd Edition. We do have some municipal utilities that run through that lot, and this proposed agreement would allow for the city to sell that lot and then to reserve a utility easement or have a utility easement granted by the buyer. The property is directly north and downhill from what I believe is known as the Surrey Heights subdivision, the condos that are up on top of Water Tower Hill. And we looked at this as city staff and were prepared to approve it. However, we did receive some information just today that indicates there may be some issues with respect to the property, specifically with respect to stormwater drainage and some other issues, access to the lot on the hillside and such. So I think taking a look at it with this new information, I think what we would like to do as city staff is take a couple of weeks, review the issues with the engineers, and come to an acceptable resolution of it. I think the agreements will probably come back to you in substantially the same form as they are now, but we do want to have a chance to make sure that we track down all of the issues and come to an appropriate resolution of everything before this property is sold. So I believe what we would request as city staff is that you continue and do not take action on this item at this meeting and allow us to bring it back to you at in 2 weeks at the second meeting in March.
Is that acceptable to the commission? Is there any objections to that? Okay, we'll go ahead and defer it then for 2 weeks. I think we can get item F done, the Board of Equalization date change. Is Mr. Hirschfeld here?
Mr. Hirschfeld is sick today, so I'll be
Oh.
taking that for him.
Okay.
Mr. Hirschfeld would like to request a delay in our Board of Equalization meeting. I think since I've been here in 6 years, we've never held the meeting on the date that we're supposed to, but generally it's been a month after. So this is actually a 2-day delay, is the quickest we've ever would be able to get this done. And the request is simply to allow Mr. Ayler from Vanguard Appraisals some time to meet with local residences, local property owners, to discuss the equalization or the assessed values of their properties, and hopefully thereby minimizing any issues that may occur during the meeting itself. So the request is to delay it 2 days and not meet earlier than 5 p.m.
So that would be Thursday, April 16th, and meet at 5 o'clock. Is that what you're,
That's correct.
any objections to that?
I may have a problem with that, but I'll see what I can do.
Well, if we have at least 4.
Okay.
We hate to see you miss that meeting.
It's a fun one.
Commissioner Jackson, is your issue the day or the time?
The day.
Okay.
So why don't you have Rita send us out in Outlook meeting notice for 5 o'clock?
Okay, I'll certainly do that.
We'll do that on the 16th. And
Thank you.
okay. So we'll move then back to the timetable agenda. We have a 5:10 Burlington Resource application to drill an oil well, and City Engineer Kubas will introduce that item.
Thank you, President Johnson, Commissioners. We did receive an application to drill a well. This is an injection well, not a saltwater injection well, but a flood injection well used on an existing lodge pole production well. And the location of this well is north of the interstate. It would be north of the Roars development, south of the Karski Dairy, if you're familiar with that. There's an existing well there right now, and they're proposing to re-drill this injection well, which had failed on them last year. I think the casing had collapsed on this well. They're going to move the well a couple hundred feet to get it up onto some higher ground, still in the same land ownership. It's on Karski property. We met with our Energy Committee a couple weeks ago. They had no objections to this well. It's kind of an out-of-sight well right now. Their only request of the applicant was that they contact all the residents within 1,000 feet of the well, which I had spoke with the applicant. He said that those letters were sent out by certified mail to all the residents. I believe there's 3 residents in there within that 1,000-foot radius. Other than that, the Energy Committee and staff would recommend approval for this well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kubas. You've heard his introduction and recommendation. Are there any comments or questions?
Are we, when we look at these applications, are we looking at some of the other aspects of the wells, the stormwater runoff, some of those kinds of things?
Well, in certain instances, we do. The last one that we looked at was in a slightly more developed area. That well was near the St. Joseph Cemetery. So we did look at stormwater. In this area, it's surrounded on all 4 sides by ag property right now. And typically, in this instance, we wouldn't look at stormwater runoff off the site.
I don't know what drainage this is. This is in, what downstream is.
I don't believe it's not a named drainage, this particular, but it is near a drainage. I suppose it'll be 500 feet, this well, from the drainage now.
Might be some prudence in starting to look at some of that stuff. It's within proximity to the city. I don't think we have to get carried away or anything, but, with some basic protection.
Okay. One other thing to note, most of the product right now is piped to this well. I'm assuming that would remain the same. The access road to the site, though, is in place. There's a existing gravel or scoria road to the well that's there now. Same access would be used. It would come off of 21st Street south and then west to this well.
Is the current well that's there, is it a flared well?
No, the current well is also an injection well, so there's no production,
Okay.
no extraction. It's all water being injected into
Just
the lodge
saltwater
pole.
disposal?
No, it's a flood injection well. It's a freshwater injection.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Is there a motion regarding the oil well application?
Make a motion to approve?
I'll second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Albans?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson? Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. That brings us down to reports by Mr. Kessel.
Thank you, President Johnson and Commission. The first update is a legislative one. As you are aware, crossover has occurred, so the House bills will become Senate, and Senate bills will become House. And so it's really our last chance to advocate on behalf of the city of Dickinson, Western North Dakota, and the things that we desire to happen. The one bill that we had two primary bills that we were watching very, very closely, the surge bill being one, and as you all are aware, that already is out and signed by the governor. It resulted in a less dollars than we originally expected. Instead of 55, we got 44, but that still means that we have 44 million to do infrastructure improvements in the community in 2015. The other bill that we're really watching is the formula bill. This is the advocated change is to move from a 75% state, 25% local share to a 60% local and 40% state share. That bill was voted on in the House and approved by them with a 70 to 18 margin to change it to a 70% state and 30% local. So they've moved it 5% in our favor. That is woefully insignificant in terms of our original goal. And so there will be much effort made to try and change that now that that is on the Senate side. The legislature will receive an update from Moody's Analytics mid-March with regard to budget and expectations, especially regarding revenue. That may favorably change some legislative's perspective, but I know that a lot of them are quite scared of the $4 billion projected lower revenue that was estimated at the last budget projection meeting that they had. So we'll actively be pursuing that legislation and others as the legislature comes back into session. We also are helping out Southwest Water for obvious reasons. Their budget is also in front of the House Appropriations Committee on March 18th, and I do plan to be down there to provide testimony for that bill specifically. So unless there's any specific questions, it remains an interesting session, as they all are. So the next item that I have then is the PERS. There's been a significant change in the North Dakota PERS. They selected Sanford Health Plan instead of Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Blue Cross and Blue Shield has been the provider of the health or medical benefit insurance for the state and any other participants in PERS for several dozen years. And I think it was 24, 28. I can't remember the number, but it's been a lot. So this is a rather significant change. We don't have a whole lot of information yet, but we have held two all-staff meetings today. We'll hold another one tomorrow, trying to keep the staff updated on any of those changes. We have yet to receive an update on what the expected increase in premiums will be. They've told us to look out for May. Excuse me. As a time frame for when we should be informed of that change in premium. Excuse me. We also received a thank you note from Dickinson Churches United. They received their subsidy. wanted to say thank you. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is the Thursday, March 5th, Designing Great Cities meeting. We do plan to advertise that as a city commission meeting so that we remain in compliance with state law, so that you all could attend if you so desire. With that, I'll take any questions you may have.
I have lots of questions for Mr. Kessel.
Would you pour him a glass of water before
Could you,
you
please pass me a glass. Ooh.
Mr. Kessel, do you know how the homeless shelter project has gone this year?
They've actually ceased operations at the end of February. They were providing only one or two people on a regular basis. Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, by the way. They have seen a decrease in attendance this winter as opposed to last winter. For them, they have to provide the similar amount of volunteers. That doesn't change based on census unless that census is extraordinary. So they decided to cut that off a little bit earlier than they did even last year because of the low census numbers.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for City Administrator?
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to Public Safety, Fire Department, Chief Spivak.
President Johnson, Commissioners, once again, I'm here before you to ask for your permission to submit an application for the Staffing for Adequate Firefighter and Emergency Personnel Grant. As it's included in your packet, it's a grant to help communities hire frontline firefighters to assist them in meeting nationally recognized staffing requirements. You see that what we're asking for is 8 firefighters. And the grant, the performance period for the grant is for 2 years. They'll pay salary, and benefits for the firefighters for a 2-year period. There is no obligation to keep those firefighters on after that 2-year period, although I believe that the growth both in area and in population that's expected of the City of Dickinson will not only warrant their retention, but may very possibly warrant the need for additional firefighters besides at that time. I'd like to state for the record and for the public that we have an admirable record with you, City Commission, in supporting the fire department. When I started as chief in 2006, when I was appointed chief in 2006, there were 3 full-time positions. You allowed us to hire a firefighter that year. A few years later, when things really started getting busy, we promoted that firefighter to a fire inspector. You allowed the hiring of another firefighter. Things got busier still. That firefighter was promoted to an inspector's position, and again, we hired a firefighter. A year or so after that, we hired an additional 3. This year, we hired 4 firefighters. By the end of 2015, we will have in administration, fire prevention, operations and response, 14 full-time positions. That is a measured, responsible growth for a department like Dickinson in a community like Dickinson, experiencing what we're experiencing. We're reaching a real point in time where addressing the growth and addressing the need to address the acceptable level of risk that only you commissioners can determine isn't going to be handled by hiring just 1 or 2 people. To staff out a fire department, to minimally staff out a new station, is going to require multiple hires. And especially in the face of the current climate of reduced oil prices and concerns about what the future may hold with the slowdown, I think we need to exercise every opportunity we have for assistance in funding that. That's what's before you today.
Thank you, Chief. Are there comments or questions for the Chief regarding this grant application?
Chief, does the grant just cover salary, or does it cover everything? Benefits?
Just salary and benefits.
Okay.
Other questions? What do you think your chances are of receiving this grant or a portion of it?
It's an extremely competitive grant. As in most federal grants, the amount of dollars allocated is far short of the amount of requests that come in. We've written this many times in the past, and the feedback that I've received from the agencies is that we fell short in the past of proving financial need. You kind of read between the lines on these things. They don't come right out and say that. But right now, we have a debt that can be proven that we haven't showed before. Also right now, another thing that I can include in a grant narrative that I haven't had before is the mayor's testimony to the Legislative Assembly. I believe we have a really good chance. It's a very competitive grant. You've given me many opportunities to write it in the past with no success.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
President Johnson, and just wanted to mention that last year we did involve our federal delegation with the grant and asked for them to advocate on our behalf as well. Unfortunately, we still didn't receive the grant, but they did provide that advocacy.
Anything else? So if you agree with the chief's request, I think the motion would be to grant permission to go ahead and make the application.
So moved.
Second.
We have the motion and the second to grant our permission. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Next, we'll hear from Chief Dossinger.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the Commission. The Dickinson Police Department requests to engage Dan Brown in an agreement to provide firearms training to Dickinson PD personnel and the Southwest Tactical Team. Dan Brown retired from our agency as a police sergeant in 2013. At that time, he was the lead firearms instructor for our department. The Dickinson PD is looking to utilize Dan's vast firearms skills and abilities and instructor ability to enhance our existing firearms instructors and training program. The addition of Dan to our group of firearms instructors would allow us to spend more time with new recruits and existing staff members to enhance their firearm proficiency. This is not a budgeted item. The expense would be paid for by salaries unexpended for the year. It would not exceed 200 hours at a pay rate of $25 per hour.
Thank you, Chief. You've heard his request. Are there comments or questions?
Mr. President, I would be in support of this here. I think we have an extremely young police force. At this time, we've lost a lot of experienced officers in the past few years. I think training those young officers is probably one of the best things we can do at this time with what they're seeing out there and the exposures that they have. So I would have no problem supporting this.
Thank you, Mr. Steiner. Other comments or questions? So if you agree with Chief Dossinger's request, the motion is to approve the training contract with Mr. Brown.
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have the motion and the second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to engineering, and we're going to hear a report on Lamont Stormwater by Scott Schneider from Apex, so welcome.
Good evening. Good evening, Commissioner, or Mr. President, Commissioners. My name is Scott Schneider with Apex Engineering Group, and I've been working with engineering department on the Lamont Stormwater Pond project. It's been on the CIP for a while. And in discussions with engineering department, we felt it was a good time in the project to give a report to you, so that you know what this project's all about. Just a little bit about the background or the overview. We're going to provide a little background on the project for your benefit and some of the proposed improvements. About a little over a year ago, the Lamont Group approached the city with a proposed plat for the Lamont Second Edition. We started looking at some of the stormwater issues with staff in this area and realized it needed a bigger picture look at what's going on in this entire watershed. So we got involved and we identified this watershed as the Sims Street watershed, north of I-94, east of Highway 22. It's about a 250-acre watershed that outfalls into the I-94 ditch, right at this location on the west side of Sims Street. The Lamont property where this all started is the hatched area in the middle of the screen. And one of the unique facts about this watershed is it was primarily developed before the Lamont Group got involved in this piece of property. And the previous development was really developed without a lot of stormwater control or detention ponds or the type of control that we're seeing in stormwater management plans today with pre versus post requirements for runoff rates. But the Lamont property, they had some plans for internal stormwater detention within their property. But one of the things that they were struggling with is there's about 150 acres up in this area. Here's 21st Street, 1st Avenue East, that drains and ultimately outfalls through the middle of this property. When we started looking at it even in more detail, it was really impacting their site, and they hadn't really come up with a good plan to deal with that runoff through the middle of their property. This is the low area behind the Hampton Inns here, to the north of the Hampton Inns, 2nd Avenue West, future Sim Street, 1st Avenue East. And so when we went through several iterations with their engineers on how this regional flow should be handled through the site, and ultimately what they proposed was some grading on the north side of their plat and then routing all of that stormwater down Sim Street. That resulted in a flow depth on Sim Street of over 18 inches of water on what we refer to as the 100-year event or the 1% chance reoccurrence interval. It's really above and beyond standards for local streets like this. So we got involved in even more details on what could really be done to manage this regional runoff from the north side of this property, and how can the city itself deal with this flow through this area. And that comes into the proposed improvements. And really, to handle bigger flow rates through an area, we either need bigger pipes to convey to convey that runoff, or we need to look for detention. We refer to detention as temporary storage, where we can attenuate that flow rate and slow down the water so we don't have as high a peak flow rates down through the system. Well, there just happens to be this park on the north side of the Lamont property. Here's the Lamont 2nd Edition, 1st Avenue East again, 16th Street. This is the All Seasons Park owned and operated by Dickinson Parks and Recreation Department. Just a couple amenities within that park. Here's the existing playground area, basketball court, the shelter, and the baseball backdrop. When we look for areas for ponds, we're either looking for public property or private property, and there just happens to be this public piece of property here that appeared to have an area of that park that was somewhat underutilized in that baseball area. Early discussions with the park district, they commented that they were open to looking at the options and what this might actually look like in terms of a regional detention pond. So we went further into the planning. We built a stormwater model for this entire watershed and came up with a regional pond concept that keeps as many of the features in this park as we can, but at the same time we are able to reduce those flows on Sim Street to an acceptable level. This is the layout of that pond. The dark lines are the proposed pond contours. It's really, we're digging a hole in the ground. You can envision that in this park area. Engineer Kubis and planner Millstone and I presented this at the Park District Board meeting on Friday. And when they first heard about this, they were assuming this entire park area would be gone with the pond. But they were definitely happy to see we would be keeping that existing playground area. The shelter would stay. We would have to relocate or build a new basketball court. And then this backdrop on that our baseball diamond excuse me, would be eliminated. They also realized that it's probably underutilized facility in some regards back on the west side of their property. A couple questions that were raised that we will work through if we move forward with this project are maintenance type agreements. Who maintains the pond? It's on the park property, but yet it's a city, probably a city pond in the future. Liability questions came up, of course. City pond on a park property. So we'll work through those issues if we move forward with this project. But the other question is, what does this really look like? Is it grassed? Yeah, it would be a grassed pond. Everything would slope to what we refer to as a trickle channel. so we don't have standing water. Those low flow events, nuisance flows sometimes in these ponds, we would put those in a trickle channel and convey those to the outlet. We have existing piping around the pond that we would tie into here, and outfall piping into here and into this location on the north side. These are just a couple pictures of some various ponds that I found to be beneficial. Here's a trickle channel example, just so you guys know what that might look like. Again, these ponds can still be multi-use from a functional standpoint. They're still park areas. People can still play in them, recreate in these areas. Just that temporary detention when we have that big rainfall event where we would see water in these areas. Here's an example of a park that even has a trickle channel right here. This is in the bottom of a pond, if you can kind of see the depth of that pond down on the bottom. So again, the concept at the Park District, they were agreeable to the concept. So we wanted to present it to you guys today to show you what the benefits are and what this actually looks like. Within this same watershed, when we were looking at the pond concept, a couple other things were pointed out to us. And one is some localized flooding on 2nd Avenue East. This is 20th Street, so Players sits just north of this aerial photo. When this area was developed on 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Avenue, there's an existing storm sewer system that was in this area. And each one of these streets created a low spot right over the top of this storm sewer system. And there's been a couple of events the last few years where there's been localized flooding fairly deep at this low point on 2nd Avenue East. I think some pictures maybe were sent to staff, and some concerns were raised by those local homeowners in that area. We looked at several alternatives, one being upstream ponds. By the time we got into that, the foundations were already going in for new houses at those low points. We also looked at upgrading this storm sewer system and what the costs of that were. What we found is it's really the issue is the size of this storm sewer here. And by upgrading this, it became a very difficult construction project, plus a very expensive one to dig through the middle of those yards, very close to houses within that 20-foot stormwater easement. So we ultimately developed this alternative where we upgrade the storm sewer size on 1st Avenue East and then take most of that flow over to our new pond, the Lamont Stormwater Pond, with some of it still going down the existing system. But one of the things that we do need to maintain is some control on about a 16 or 17 acre watershed on the east here. This is within the Diamond Acres plat that's undeveloped right now. There will need to be some type of local detention to the east as that area develops. So that's the 2nd Avenue East improvements that we also developed as part of the Lamont Stormwater project. The third area that we looked at is the low point on 14th Street East, right in front of the Hampton Inn. There are 2 inlets at that low point. There's about 58 acres of watershed that contribute to those 2 inlets. It's been noted there's local flooding there at that low point during major rainfall events. So we took a look at what could be done at that low point and some possible improvements in this area. Here is the low point in front of Hampton Inn. The black rectangles or squares are the existing inlets. We have a parallel pair of 42-inch pipes. We could easily install 2 more inlets at that low point that would help reduce the depth of flooding. The majority of that water, though, is coming from the east on 14th Street. And in this area, the grade of the street really flattens out. And again, that big watershed with no inlets in, we start seeing flooding, street flooding in this area. Excuse me, pretty significant. So some inlets at 1st Avenue East would definitely help reduce the flows on 14th Street as well as the depth of flooding at that low point. The other thing that happened during the development of the Lamont property is the Lamont Group installed a new sanitary sewer down to this manhole on 14th Street. And they kept having standing water in this lower section of the pipe. Public Works videoed this line and found that there's a sag just between these 2 manholes and that existing pipe. There's also a really deep sag in this pipe between this manhole and 1st Avenue East. So as part of this project, it would be an upgrade or a replacement of that sanitary sewer as well to fix that so that Public Works does not have a continuous maintenance issue on their hands within this area. So costs, opinion of probable costs, a little over or just under 1.7 million for all of these put together. One of the big variables in the Lamont Stormwater Pond is the cost to move that dirt off-site. As I said, we're digging a hole. There's been some discussions, or maybe someone's heard that the Lamont group is looking for dirt. If they need the dirt, that price of dirt, to move that dirt off-site, it's going to go down a lot. So that $870,000 has a lot of variable. That's probably a high number right now if they want the dirt. Overall, benefits from the proposed improvements. Not only do we reduce the flows down Sim Street from the Lamont Stormwater Pond, we have a regional benefit from this project. The baseline flows is what's there today with all the development in place. The middle line is the Lamont Pond project. You can see we have a 45% reduction in flow rate at the outfall of this watershed. Now the receiving watershed from this watershed is the Dickinson drainage ditch. So there is a benefit to this watershed as well as the downstream receiving watershed from the Lamont Stormwater Pond, and fairly significant in those regards. Again, that area on First Avenue, if we upgrade that storm sewer on First Avenue East, we have a considerable reduction in flood depths at the low point on Second Avenue as well as the low point on Third Avenue. We would, from the modeling, we're seeing reduction of that 10-year flooding event at that low point. Again, 14th Street East, we would reduce those flood depths as well as the street flows on 14th Street East. So with that, I can try and answer any questions that the commission may have. We felt it was important that we present this. It's kind of the first regional type stormwater project that the city is maybe going to undertake here going forward. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Schneider. Mr. Kubas, any comments before we ask the commissioners for comments, questions?
Well, one comment I would add, Mr. President, is like Mr. Schneider said, we had met with the Park and Recs Department at their board meeting on Friday to present not this entire presentation, but on the Lamont Pond specifically. And the board was receptive. I guess we didn't ask for any motions be made at that meeting, but left the meeting with consensus on their approval to use park property for this pond. So we wanted to get that hurdle out of the way before we brought it to commission this evening, as we're looking for someone else's property to help solve a stormwater problem of the city. So they were receptive to the idea, and we hope we can move forward with the project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kubas. Commissioners, any comments or questions?
Those neighborhoods up there, there's some pretty bad groundwater in some places. Do you see the pond affecting that one way or the other?
I don't see the pond itself affecting the groundwater that's in that area. I mean, we might mitigate it really locally around the pond, but the area of influence, of course, isn't going to go that far out because we're only going to be about 7 feet in the ground with the pond.
But we're not worried about inadvertently charging up that groundwater?
We would be downstream of most of that groundwater, but we will be bringing geotechnical on for the pond design, so we could take a look at that during the analysis of that pond to make sure we do not have a negative impact on that.
I expect, and I don't know what Mr. Kubas thinks about this, but we do have some work being done citywide with our stormwater. We're going to find other situations like this in the community, I'm sure. I don't know how that affects our decision on this particular project, but we will, I'm sure, have more like it once we get that work done. No?
Well, we hope so. We know that there's issues out there. This area presented a unique solution or potential solution in that we did have a piece of public property that was, like Mr. Schneider said, underutilized to some degree. So it's a good fit for a pond. I wish there was a piece of public property at every place that we had a problem, but we know that there will be more issues than this one. Again, the cost of this project isn't insignificant either, and we've briefly talked about internally some funding options in other cities, looking at other cities and their funding mechanisms to do some of these more regional ponds, and how that upstream contributors to the watershed might pay for this property or this project. This one, unfortunately, is I don't know if it's 3/4 or maybe more than 3/4 developed, and developed for many, many years in some cases. So if we proceed with the project, I think that'll be our next point of discussion is looking for private contributions. We know that, right now the Lamont Group couldn't move forward with their project as a whole until we could resolve the stormwater issue. So we think we have a party there that would contribute to the project. This, I believe, would remove the need for a pond within the Lamont second subdivision, which is just the property just to the south, in between this park and the Hamptons. So I think other properties that would want to develop upstream in this watershed now or in the future would be parties that I would consider looking towards for contribution to the project. But it's not an insignificant project. Again, highly variable at this time, the cost of it, but I would say at least $500,000.
Well, I know we created a stormwater utility not too many years ago. We don't use it very much, I don't think.
It's been used more and more, Commissioner Jackson, especially with the city's MS4 requirements. And I think as more of these detention ponds be developed, and long-term, I think that the Stormwater Division is going to be maintaining these. I think that will be our next enterprise fund that we really need to look at for funding rates and I guess how it's funded.
I guess that's why I brought it up.
And as you said, I doubt if the park will want to maintain that stormwater pond.
Right.
So it'll be another maintenance for the city.
Mr. Kessel, I seem to recall that in our capital list of projects for 2015, we are carrying the Lamont Stormwater project. I forget the amount. I think it's less than $2 million, but
President Johnson, it's exactly $2 million.
exactly two.
It is our,
That's what I meant to say. I think it's exactly $2 million.
it is our 15th of 23 project.
But we are carrying that in our expectations for 2015. I actually, I've been doing some analysis since the surge bill passed. I think we can do all of our 2015 projects and not go any further into debt. I don't think we can engineer any 2016 or 17 projects in 2015. We would be using all of our money. So it looks to me like it's very close. But I mean, we can go ahead with all these projects. I just don't think we can go ahead with any 2016 ones at this point.
Well, one thing we need to remember, if we don't engineer 2016 projects in 15, we may not have any 2016 projects.
Exactly. I understand that. But it's a question of how much debt are you willing to take on. I think we're committed to, in round numbers, roughly $103 million of debt right now with what we're doing. And you won't have any surge money in 2016. You will just have formula money, which, depending upon what they do with the formula bill, and it'll be one of the last bills passed so we won't know until the end of the session. And Mr. Kessel, do you recall, is part of the formula bill, is that where we also have the monies for the percentage of employment, you know, the...
That's correct. Yep, they're wrapped up together. And I should mention that there has been discussion of a second surge bill next biennium with a lower formula percentage. So if the 70-30 is passed, there has been some discussions of another surge bill next biennium, which was not a possibility. It's the first time I've heard that.
Yeah,
put it that way.
but keep in mind, the biennium we're talking about that the legislature's working on now ends in June of 2017. So what we get here is all that we're receiving. And, you know, you heard Chief Seevock earlier talking about, you know, how our fire staff has increased. We are moving, each year we've moved more dollars from the oil impact funds into the general fund to balance it. And now beginning with this year, you start to have to pay principal and interest on the debt. And in 2016, you'll have a full payment of that. And I don't think you're going to be able to put all that on the backs of the enterprise funds. You're going to need to soften that blow by moving some oil impact money into debt payment. So we get right down to it. Unless you're willing to take on a lot of debt, you know, you can do the projects that we've carried on our 2015 list, but there's no point in engineering them in 2015 unless you're willing to take on considerably more debt than in 16 and 17. I think you have to look very hard at whatever projects, anything that would be a 2016 project, it better be critically important. Otherwise, we don't have the money to do it. And if it's critically important, you still don't have the money to do it, you're going to have to borrow it.
One of the increasing expenses we've experienced, as you know by your motions earlier this evening, is right-of-way acquisition. So that has to be considered in the mix of 2016 projects as well, not just engineering those projects, but acquiring the necessary right-of-ways to get them done.
So, I mean, we kind of gone away from Mr. Schneider's presentation, but you know, it's stormwater is as we all know, is a major item here in the West, especially with the kind of terrain that we have. And as we add these parking lots and rooftops, where we used to have slow runoff, we now have very high-speed runoff in large amounts of water, and it's an issue to deal with. So it's an important issue. I thought this presentation was well put together. I don't have enough of an engineering background to tell if it works, but it sure looks good. You know, it looks like it should work. So very helpful.
Mr. President, if I may, and that's why we put it together for you. Apex had been looking at this for over the past year or so now through their stormwater modeling or the general modeling task order that they have. We knew we had an issue out there. We wanted to bring it forward to the commission. If there's consensus to move forward on this project, I think in the next meeting or two, we'd have a task order prepared, and then we'd enter into the final design stages of the project. But again, with all that's been said about funding, I think we needed to present the argument, if you will, on the need for the project. There is a couple areas of localized flooding and a significant area of development that really can't occur until we do something with the stormwater regionally. So,
Well, I think you guys have to look at these 2015 projects, and you know, at one time these were your top priorities, and that's likely not changed. But I think you need to take a look at it just to double check it, make sure, are these the priorities? Because, like I said, we could very well get into this year and say we don't have money to engineer for 2016, and we don't want you to get into 2016 and say, gee, I wish I wouldn't have done that project, that other project in 2015 and save some money for this critical one in 2016. So, you know, I think we rely on your recommendations a lot when it comes to the priorities here. But I think, you know, between the, you know, what's happened to date in the legislature, what we know today about the oil prices, we'll get the mid-March update for state revenues by Moody. We'll have a little more information then.
Well, and we'll have some bid prices for you at our next meeting. We're between last Thursday and the next commission meeting, we'll have bid 3 really significant projects. So we'll have some real dollars to talk about and how we've came in on bids versus our estimates that we've been carrying forward. And sounds like an agenda item for the next week too is maybe a relook at the 15-16 CIP list.
And President Johnson, we have started that process already as a staff.
Good.
So, and anecdotally, based on my basketball skills, I would keep the court inside the depression so that the ball comes back after I miss.
We can try and make that request happen.
I've seen him jump. You don't have to worry about dunking. Okay, this is just a presentation. You're not asking for any approvals at this point. Anything else regarding this item? All right, thank you. Very good.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we'll go to Public Works. We have a series of 3 change orders here, and Mr. Zaroff, you can just go through all 3 of them. You don't need me to introduce them to you.
Thank you, President Johnson and Commission. The first change order is with the West Pump Station. It's change order number 3 with William Civil, who is the general. The dollar amount is $101,844.53. This change order includes 16 items with a total increase cost of $101,000. Incorporating this change order, the total contract price will still be under the original contract due to previous decreases. There was considerable discussion on each of these items throughout the project, and the descriptions are included in your packet. The project is near substantial completion, and staff recommends approval. I'll answer any questions.
Okay, are there any comments or questions? This original contract was over $11 million.
$11,400,000, and with this change order, the price will be $11,363,962.70.
Okay, any comments or questions?
I guess I have a few questions.
Okay, go ahead.
On some of these issues, like on the lift station 5, when they're saying that you had the asbestos cement and you were thought it was or believed to be PVC. PVC, yes. Why is that not caught initially?
Well, and there's another change order in here on location of a water line that the mapping showed it was there and it was not there. That's history and mapping records, you know, and we didn't dig down to see the pipe on, you know, all this project. It was miles of pipeline and installation, and along with that lift station. So I guess it was at the time historical documents that we knew showed it was wasn't AC pipe that we knew at the time.
And when we're getting the engineering and the consultants at the beginning, they're not delving into that?
Well, a lot of that stuff is based on the city records the city records of what was installed at that time. There is some good records for the city, but there's a lot of records that are lacking or misplaced over the years on a lot of the projects within the city. And that's been one of the difficulties of location of lines, types of main in different areas are unknown.
Okay, thank you.
So when you have a contractor bid on documents, bids are based upon assumptions that a water line's in a certain spot or that this water line or sewer line is in good condition and, is not included to be replaced.
Right.
You get into the ground and then you can find that the pipes aren't there or that they're in a different place, or you can find that we have pipes that are, which were assumed maybe to be in operable conditions that are not.
Correct.
Is that kind of what these items are in many of these change orders?
There's a lot of them like that. I would say a good amount of them are. There was some records on Highway 22, for example, that engineering and Public Works were both trying to find a water line that one of the records showed it was there. We spent days trying to find that water line because they were boring under 22. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the change orders. Best available records, and it showed a water line there, but there was not existent at the end, that we could never find it.
Is this also why GIS is so important in getting, our infrastructure mapped?
I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, that's one of the things we were years. It's been quite a few years since that's been updated and kept up. And now, especially with all this growth, a lot of the mapping isn't incorporated into our GIS. And coincidentally, today I was part of the interviews for a GIS position, and hopefully we can fill that soon. But that's true. Between engineering and Public Works, a lot of that compiling that information, incorporating it into a GIS system, I think is real important. And I believe engineering would agree.
Mr. Jackson?
We talked last time about getting better descriptions of some of these change order items, and I think we have them with this change order. I find them very, very helpful, very helpful. And when I read through them, I can understand how each one of these things happen. A lot of it is a manifestation of the pace of life in western North Dakota right now. I see situations where utilities were installed between the time of design and construction, and that's really unusual to have that happen, but I know it's happening plenty. But the bottom line is, when I read through these explanations, they all make sense to me. We need to continue to encourage our staff and our consultants to be good negotiators on our behalf, because a lot of these items come down to negotiation with the contractor. So we're relying on you guys and our consultants to do that.
And I will say, Apex, the contractor on this job, if he had his way, there would probably be 160 changes. So there was a lot of negotiations that you don't see here to get it to this point.
Well, and I see items that, I suppose the consultant and staff could have said, no, we're not going to make this decision till we take it back to a city commission meeting. Mm-hmm. And you could sit and wait, but it's not. I'm sure we would have come to the same conclusion had we had the facts brought to us. So again, I think it's right that we give our staff and our consultants the leeway to do some of these things.
Other comments? Okay, so the first change order then is the West Pump Station change order number 3. in the amount of $101,844.53, and this would be a change order add. Is there a motion to either approve or disapprove this change order addition?
I'll move we approve.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there other discussion? Hearing none, then we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. That takes us to lift station 12 then.
The next change order is for lift station 12, the project 12 and Force Main improvements. This is change order number 2 with Rice Lake Construction. Majority of this change order is the replacing the AC water main that was under 15th, and then some roadway millings that we put in there prior to the arrival of winter. During the construction of this project, water main breaks occurred, basically from the brittle AC pipe. They exposed the pipe, and the area of construction, we determined that, or we felt that the AC water main needed to be replaced. So that is the majority of the change order. The total change order is an increase of $167,322. Again, there's supporting documentation in your packet, and staff recommends approval.
That AC water pipe was just over $124,000. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's a city decision. Once that pipe was exposed, you decided it should be replaced.
Correct.
That's not really driven by the contractor.
It was unknown. It was our decision because of the breaks we were having. And if we continued construction, we would have, without replacing that AC main, we would have continued to have water main breaks, we felt.
Other questions or comments regarding this change order? If there are no questions or comments, again, you can either move to approve change order number 2 in the amount of add of $167,322, or you can move to not approve it, or I suppose you could move to approve a substitute amount.
Move to approve, Mr. President.
We have the motion to approve the $167,322. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion?
You know, I would like to add one bit of discussion. In my comments, I don't mean to suggest that we shouldn't ask questions about this, that we shouldn't challenge Mr. Zuroff, Mr. Kubas, and our consultants. We absolutely should. I don't think we can ask enough questions, but I do think these make sense. And again, the explanations help.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Anybody else? Okay, well, we have the motion and the second. We'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries.
Thank you, President Johnson. Commission, the next change order is with Shingabee Builders on the Dickinson Public Works Facility. It's change order number G12, and it is for a deduct of $20,489.32. There's been ongoing negotiation on pavement quantities during the construction, that they were requesting an increase for payment, and then it includes a compensation for the misaligned hoist for a deduct of $30,153.11, resulting in the decrease in contract price for the $20,049.32. Staff recommends approval, and I can answer any questions.
Does the misaligned hoist function?
It does. We looked at it for quite a while. It does function. One of the reasons we wanted the $30,153.11 was when they installed the hoist, they requested that additional amount of funds for excavation and installation. And so that's why we're requesting that part back. It is misaligned a little bit. The idea was to go from one hoist to the other through the building. I think we can still do it, but it was misaligned enough that we thought we would deserve some compensation for it.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? So this is a deduct to the contract of $20,489.32. Would there be a motion to either approve or disapprove this change order deduct?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any other discussion on it? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. That takes care of the change orders.
That's all the change orders. Thank you, President Johnson.
So you want to go to item B?
The next item is a consulting agreement with Grace Rickson. This agreement is to provide certain laboratory testing services and set up for the City Water Reclamation Facility Lab. Right now, our lab is getting completed. The lab for the facility is a full-service lab, and we can do about any test that's required, but because of the staff that's not familiar with setting up labs and running the tests, we feel it's important to have somebody get us to that point and become certified. Once we're a certified lab, then we won't need to send most of the tests out as we do now. There'll still be some tests that we won't be able to do in-house, but we're hoping this agreement with Ms. Rickson, we can become certified and then not have to send samples to Bismarck. One thing I also want to bring up is that the new discharge permit increased our testing considerably. Some of these tests were only, a couple times a month. Now we're having to do it 3-4 times a week on a new discharge permit. So there's quite a bit of additional testing required. And since we have the lab as part of our facility, we want to get it certified. And so I guess I'm asking permission to approve the agreement with Ms. Rickson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zuroff. You've heard his introduction and request. Are there comments or questions from Mr. Zuroff? Mr. Zuroff, I'm not familiar with Grace Rickson. Can you tell us about her qualifications here?
She's currently the water treatment facility manager for Southwest Water. She runs the water treatment plant and does all the testing for them. She's local. She would be available to help them get set up on weekends and go through the certification process. We have had different consultants with Apex as part of the project help us get things set up in the lab, but we aren't able to, because they have to fly in from Fargo, we aren't able to get all the processes and get it certified. With her locally, we feel we can, she can get us up and certified quicker and get it approved.
Okay, thank you. Other comments or questions? Hearing none, is there a motion regarding this agreement?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any other discussion? We'll go ahead and vote then. Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Anything else, Mr. Zuroff?
No, next, just that we're going to have the annual report. Sanitation Manager Prouse is going to give our annual solid waste report, and we're also working on an annual water report that's never been done and an annual street report to try to get the commission informed of what's going on. But
Okay.
Mr. Prouse will give the presentation.
Thank you. Well, welcome, Mr. Prowse.
Thank you, Mr. Zaroff. Good evening, President Johnson, Commissioners. As Mr. Zaroff said, I'm here tonight to present to you the 2014 Annual Sanitation Department Report. This report is actually put together and submitted to the North Dakota Department of Health for year-end closure, which was due today, so you know. As you're aware, our department consists of three individual facilities. It's the Baylor Building, the MSW landfill, which is southeast of Dickinson, and then also the inert emergency lime sludge landfill, which is located south of Dickinson. All those permits they're all permitted facilities that the health department does inspections on. This year, we will once again see significant increases in a lot of our totals. Combined totals this year, we're at about 73,200 total tons. It does not include any of the concrete and asphalt that came into our facilities for disposal purposes or for crushing and recyclables. Of those 73,000 tons, about 68,000 were actually disposed of in the MSW landfill. On a 5-year comparison, a few keynotes that I put together here for you guys. You're going to notice that the bale count numbers are down a little bit, and that is due to August 22nd of 2014. We made a transition to a loose fill operation. That transition was based on a decision and a recommendation from Wenck Engineering, which is a landfill consultant that we're operating under. One of the key ones that you're going to notice, I don't know which is the pointer, the other household materials, the out-of-city and imported routes number, seen a significant increase compared to 2013. That is driven by the customers and the haulers not properly sorting or separating their materials. Therefore, they're paying the higher household rate instead of the construction waste rate. And you will see there's about a 5,000 or 4,000 ton decrease on construction waste. You also see that the cardboard numbers went down a little bit. Those numbers are lowered because of a few of our customers that have decided to privately segregate their cardboard and ship it to other recyclers. Overall tonnages, again, as I told you guys, we were at 73,263 tons for 2014. That does not include the asphalt or concrete coming in for disposal or unit count items. Based, comparing to last year, we're at about 4,600 more tons, or it equates to about 6.5% increase. But when you look back at 5 years, we're at 32,800 tons, or 81% increase. Our household waste, this is a combine of both in-city and imported, meaning coming from surrounding communities. As the city of Dickinson continues to grow, so do the surrounding communities, so you'll see these numbers increasing on a regular basis. Last year, we went up 10,780 tons, which is about a 28% increase. Comparing to a 5 years ago, we're at just about 24,000 ton increase, or 95%. Our oil field tonnages in 2012, we had to set some parameters on acceptable oil field waste coming into our facilities due to issues that we were having out at our landfill. Since 2012, the oil field tonnages have been remaining very consistent with each other. Our incoming tonnages, this is a breakdown of all the household type materials. On the top left, you'll see the City of Dickinson materials. On the bottom right, you see all the other household or the imported and out-of-city type materials. Focusing on the City of Dickinson, you'll see about an 1,800 ton increase, more than last year, or just a hair under 7,000 tons over 5 years. Looking at the bottom side on the other household stuff, You'll see just about a 9,000 ton increase. Again, as I told you guys, some of that is driven by no segregation from these outside haulers. And then also the growth that the other communities are receiving. And I'm missing. Okay, I'll skip that one. The one that I missed was, it was the MSW bale comparison chart. They're obviously, since August of 2014, we stopped baling. That number basically went to a 0 after that. We now use that facility as recycling purposes and cardboard and paper baling. On this slide right here, we're looking at scale transactions. This is only for transactions that were completed at the Baylor building. This does not include anything that's done through City Hall. So all of our commercial, or all of our utility billing accounts that get billed through City Hall are not factored in on any of this amount or this increase. If you look at the way bottom, you'll see that there's, once again, over a 5-year total, there's an increase of 300,000.
You're going to excuse me.
Yep.
What's the total on that cash number on that previous slide? No?
Let me grab this other book here.
242. Yeah, about 240.
The total is 2,427,000.
I'm sorry?
Where are you at?
The cash column, the left column.
Okay,
So they come in and they pay cash or they charge it, right?
I see there's, looks like, okay, the cash column is when customers come in, they actually pay cash upfront across
Understand.
our scale.
Do you know what that total is for the year?
27,000. $27,005.
Well, that's just for December.
That's for the month of December.
Oh, we don't have a total.
I don't have a running total, no.
Okay.
But when you put everything together, it'll equal out that 2,427,000. That's cash charges coming through that facility. Okay?
Nearly $600,000 in cash. So it's a lot of, you have a lot of cash.
When we go to the recycling side of it, there's numerous items here that are recyclable. Sorry for the people in the back that can't see this. It is very small. Focusing on the top few lines, we are doing some cardboard and paper recycling now. The paper recycling, this is the first full year that we're getting into that. There's been an addition of some containers and such in that department. There is a revenue coming through on that as well of $32,000. One of the other key things is the waste oil that's collected. This was the first full year that I actually contracted waste oil out with a hauler. In the past, we used to end up paying a local company to come in and collect our used waste oil. Since switching to the new company, we've actually made $12,000 on used oil. Also on this chart here, we do not have any of the totals of incoming concrete or asphalt. The only totals we have on here are the materials that got sold. In closing on the PowerPoint, I just would like to take a minute to thank all my employees for their dedication and support through this challenging and economically strong year, especially with the growth and transitions that the department has been going through. Special thank you would go out to Angie DeWall for helping me put this presentation together, as well as the report, which you guys, I believe, have a hard copy in front of you on. And on behalf of the department, I would like to thank each and every one of you commissioners for allowing us to get the equipment necessary to keep the department moving in a forward direction. In 2014, we did, between additions and replacements, we did add 6 trucks. The 7th truck showed up early in 2015. We have also added 3 very beneficial pieces of equipment out at the landfill. There was a twin engine scraper, a dozer, and a loader. That all got taken place in 2014. Before I part, Mr. Zuroff has also asked me to speak a little bit on behalf of some of the plans for 2015. I believe we are ranked number 3 on the capital improvement plan for landfill improvements and structures. There is some land acquisitions that are in place right now or going through discussion on that. With that whole deal and the land purchases being made, I've had several discussions with Wenk Engineering. We are looking at after the land purchase or potential expansion takes place, there's plans that are already drawn up or have been working on, and we've got a draft going together for a facility out at the landfill. Part of the whole transition, going loose fill operation, was to move the scale and facilities out to the landfill, finding potential uses for the baler building, which we are looking at recyclable products and expanding further onto that direction. Gary, you want to take over from there?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. And as you see in the presentation that Aaron did, I think you can really see what we mean by a regional landfill, of the increase of other areas, other cities that are using our landfill. The land acquisition and the project was, we had it as 2015. We did move the construction of the building and facility to 16 because we still have to work on the purchase of the land. I'm hoping that we can continue with that project. We definitely need the land purchase, and the new improvements at the landfill, as Aaron stated, were part of the feasibility study on the baler versus loose fill. Right now, I think I'm not sure how we have the funding. I think we can look at some of that project in enterprise fund. The land acquisition, I think we were looking at using other funds because that would be because of the regional, the landfill being a regional landfill. But I guess we're hoping that we continue with that project, and as you can see, our totals just continue to increase.
I think one of the things you're going to have to look at and bring back to the commission is, you know, the rates we're charging for those residents who live outside the city limits. If those are the proper rates, meaning what I'm suggesting is that perhaps they need to be higher if we're going to continue as a regional landfill and accommodate everyone's needs. Those rates may have to go up because, you know, again, we're likely not to have sufficient oil impact funding to do all that we can, and so where there are rates where we can kind of self-fund ourselves, I think you'll have to look at doing that. So,
and with our feasibility report, part of that was, you know, we looked at the price of and the cost of getting a bigger baler, you know, the dollar amounts there, and are going loose fill. And with our current rates, a lot of that was included, some of that was included, and so I think we need to look at that again to see what our current rate structure and how we fund it. Of course, with an increase again in usage, I guess you'd say this year, hopefully most of that can be done through, or majority of it can be done through the enterprise fund,
right.
And looking at the other rates.
I'm just suggesting that that those who live outside the city limits may have to pay more for us providing this service and taking the risks that we do with it. So, but you need to look at that and make a recommendation.
I could provide a little bit of clarity of how we have it scheduled today. As Mr. Prowse said, it is our third-ranked project in 2015. We have 2.5 dedicated to land purchases and design engineering. 1.5 of that is designated from formula funds. In 2016, the balance of the project is about 4.25 million, and 3.25 is formula funds. So we'd have $2 million currently scheduled from enterprise revenues to pay for this project.
You may not have any formula funds for 2016. so-
Or a much smaller amount.
Or a
than we
much
expect.
smaller amount,
Yeah.
so you may have to rely more on the fee generation ability, and I'm suggesting if we do, I think the increases should go to those who live outside our city as opposed to those who live inside the city.
We can sure look at that again. I think we did look at the rates then, but I think I appreciate those comments. President Johnson, I think it's worth looking at again, especially when we get the increase.
We have a new reality, and one of the things that I think stood out in the numbers, there were a lot of things that stood out, but, I mean, you know, we are bringing in a lot of tonnage from outside the city of Dickinson.
Our tonnages from outside the city of Dickinson actually are very equal, if not a hair more than what we're getting in city.
Anything else for
Good
Mr.
report.
Prowse?
Good report.
Thank you.
We had, Mr. Prowse, as long as you're up here, I think we should let the rest of the commission know about the voicemail I received sometime Saturday from a concerned resident. And correct me if I'm wrong, but what this resident was concerned about is he had a container that he was putting his refuge in, and that container went away, and now he's waiting for a container from the city. And I think he said he was told that it could take up to 30 days to get this, and so he called me and wants to know what to do with his garbage. So I did what any good mayor would do. I forwarded the email to Mr. Zuroff. Mr. Zuroff did what any good public director would do. He forwarded the email to you. And you called him, and what did you learn?
Well, thanks for passing it down first off. Yes, you are correct. The individual, they were going through two different companies. The transition between one company to the other, his can disappeared for up to like 30 days. It was supposed to be there that long. As we were continuing our discussion, he was talking about a subdivision named Colonial Estates. As all of you know, there's too many subdivisions coming in. Nobody could keep up anymore with the names. So as I was talking with him further, he said he was on Google, and he ran through City of Dickinson, and the first one that came up was Dickinson, North Dakota. He actually was calling from Dickinson, Texas, and this whole transition was what took place in Dickinson, Texas, not Dickinson, North Dakota. So he did apologize for it, and we actually were hung up the phone laughing. So
Well, I hope he appreciated your quick response.
he did. He did.
You know, I also had a call this weekend, and I know it was from Dickinson, North Dakota. But this guy said that new building just came online, and apparently the tenants or owners of the new building had not asked for a receptacle. So they were using neighbors' receptacles. I don't know how that works, but
That actually happens very frequently.
really? Is that something we could tie to a CO, that when you get a CO, it automatically gets a...
Most often what happens is once they set their account up through utility billing down here at City Hall, the ladies out front will send us the email notifying us of who we need to contact, and then we move forward with setting that up. On occasion, we obviously turn the water on way before the receptacle shows up because they're operating under their COs or working with their facilities as they're completing them. So sometimes those transitions fall through, but most often they get caught. General protocol, though, is the individuals down here at City Hall do notify us by email. You sure it wasn't in Dickinson, Texas?
Well, I just thought we took this regional landfill concept a little too far when we covered Dickinson, Texas, but...
Notate, we're now national.
you know.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move to item 8, planning, and this regards the West Dickinson Plan Amendment to our comprehensive plan, and Director Millstone, do you have anything you would like to say in way of introduction of this item?
Mr. President, Commission members, I'd just like to say this is the second reading for the proposed amendments to our West Dickinson area plan. There haven't been any changes since the last reading, and the Planning and Zoning Commission and city staff recommend approval. That being said, I'm here as well as our consultant to answer any questions.
Okay. So at this time, if there's anyone from the public that would like to comment on ordinance number 1572, you may do so now. Just come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. Is there anyone that wishes to comment? There's no one that wishes to comment. Are there any comments by city staff or city commissioners regarding ordinance 1572? There are no comments by staff or commissioners. Would there be a motion then regarding the second reading and final passage of ordinance number 1572?
Move to approve.
Is there a
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, so the motion carries. Go to item 9. Are there any items by city commissioners? Not, we'll go to item 10. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to address the commission? If so, come to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. There's no one from the public, so the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. The motion carries.